Okay, welcome everybody. Delighted to see everybody here again today. This is our final summer school online lecture of 2024. Of course, if you're in Belfast next week, we'll maybe see you at Queen's. And today, well, you're all very welcome, and especially welcome is our speaker, Dr. Michael McOsker from University College London. I'm really delighted to have Michael here today because he's going to talk about something that I studied in my master's degree, and it was just fascinating stuff. But a little about Michael, first of all. His PhD is from the University of Michigan on the poetics of Philodemus of Gadara. And currently, he is a researcher in the Department of Greek and Latin at UCL, University College London, with the project Hexameters Beyond the Canon, New Poetry from Roman and Byzantine Egypt. And this project is currently editing the poems found on papyri at ancient Oxyrhynchus in Egypt. Before he was at UCL, Michael held a postdoc at the University of Cologne, working on the carbonized papyri found in Herculaneum. He's also a judge on the Vesuvius Challenge, and he's promised to tell us what that actually means at some stage. So this leads us nicely along to the topic of our lecture about papyri. Michael's going to give us an introduction to Herculaneum papyrology. I'm going to pass over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen and then put in there we go, PowerPoint. Good. Everybody can see that. Great. So this is the Bay of Naples, looking out from the port of Mergellina over the Castel dell'Ovo there, sort of in the middle of the water. And then Vesuvius beyond it. So this is our nice little scene setting. This is a satellite image of the same thing. You can see Vesuvius pretty clear there over in the right part. And then all along the water of the Bay of Naples, you have the major sites. So Pompeii is sort of down here south. Herculaneum is up here more to the west. And that's important for the way that the eruption destroyed and also preserved the cities. So Pompeii was buried beneath basically a rain of gravel. Small rocks mixed with some ash, just buried and kind of crushed the whole city. But Herculaneum was hit by a sort of tidal wave of volcanic mud, which was traveling very fast and was very hot. And this meant that organic matter, right, like papyrus scrolls and wood, didn't burn in Herculaneum. It was immediately encased in very hot mud, so it underwent the effects of heat, but didn't combust and turn into ash because there was no oxygen. It just carbonized, it turned into coal instead. And so, whereas at Pompeii, because there was still oxygen in the air, organic matter just burned, right? So very little organic matter from Pompeii, surprisingly lots of it from Herculaneum. And that's important because without that volcanic mud, the papyri wouldn't have survived. They just would have combusted into ash. This is a floor plan executed by a Swiss army engineer named Karl Weber. Karl Weber was working for the king of Naples at the time, who was a Spaniard. So if you can read upside down, the marginal notes on this are actually in Spanish. This is a floor plan of the villa, the so-called Villa of the Papyri. It's called that because this is the villa where the papyri were found. There isn't a clear scale, but this building is gigantic. It is the largest private residence known from Greco-Roman antiquity. It was rebuilt outside Los Angeles as the Getty Villa, which is one of the museums. So the Getty Villa is the Villa of the Papyri, flipped on its axis. So you can see this little colonnade here is down here on the map, right? This gigantic portico with the pool is this gigantic portico with the pool. And there are replicas of all the statues where they were found as best as they were reported. So it's really definitely worth a visit if you're interested. This is what it looks like now. So you can see it's about 30 meters underground. This little portico, you can see the columns, is the same one that I drew attention to here and here. So that gives you a sense of how much of it is still underground. And this is that little bit of it that was brought to light. So most of the excavations of the villa took place in the 18th century through little tunnels, and you can sort of see those remnants of those here that were filled in. But in the 1990s, a little bit of it, this one area was brought to light, and they did more digging down towards the ocean front, towards the bay. And that revealed that there was another entire floor down here that Weber didn't know about it. And in fact, there are two more floors down here. So the villa was a 4-story building, not a 1-story building. And it's even more gigantic than Weber and the Gettys knew. So this is what you can see in natural light now. These are filled in tunnels. This is one of the not filled in tunnels. It's blocked off with this metal gate. And this is what the tunnels look like. So when I was in Naples as a grad student back in 2013, I got to actually go in the villa. And this is what being in the villa is like. So when you see the finds that came out of this, uh, you know, yeah, the ancient diggers were treasure hunters, but they got a lot out of there in good condition, and that deserves some credit. You can just barely see some mosaic, the white tiles of the mosaic peeking through along the floor there, maybe. So in addition to the papyri, they found some statues, a lot of bronzes. Bronzes don't normally survive because the metal itself was too important. So the Villa of the Papyri is a really important source for bronze sculptures like the runners and this boy resting. And this is one of the so-called Herculaneum women. We have a statue of Epicurus here on the left, and then some more funny stuff like the satyr riding a wineskin and a drunken satyr passing out. He seems to have stolen Hercules's lion skin and is flopping over on it. But we're most interested in these. These are papyrus rolls that were carbonized. You can see where little inventory number tags were put into them. The two on the outside are probably nearly at their full length. The one in the middle is probably 1/4 to 1/5 of its full length. This is what they look like when they come out of the ground. So the papyrus roll was carbonized in the ancient world. You can see the spirals still in the carbonization. You can see the circular structure, sort of flattened, irregular oval structure. And they need to be unrolled. They were unrolled by this guy, Father Antonio Piaggio, who was a Scolopian monk and one of the Vatican librarians. He invented a machine, which we just call Piaggio's machine, or La Macchina di Piaggio, which looks like this. Basically, a papyrus, you can see one here, was hung up on strings that were glued to its back. And then this was closed up with little dishes of papyrus juice and water down here. And then it was closed. In Naples, it gets pretty hot. The water evaporated. The humid air restored a little pliability to the papyrus. And then it could be gently unrolled by adjusting the torsion on the strings with these little pegs here. A fast rate, the fastest that Piaggio wanted to go was a centimeter a day. These rolls are on average 10 or 12 meters long, so it was taking quite a while to unroll them and see anything. But it's the best system that anybody has ever come up with, including today, for physically unrolling the papyri. Nowadays, we don't try to physically unroll them. That'll be the end of the presentation. This is what they look like. This is a bit of Demetrius Laco, Demetrius the Spartans on Poems, Book 2. It has been unrolled and then cut and then glued onto this heavy paper backing. So you can see the cracks that are sort of burned into the papyrus. This is where, as it was unrolling and enough of it came off, it would crack. And then, so it could be laid not perfectly flat, right? You can see some shadows, but flat enough. This is a natural light photograph. I took it with an iPhone. There's nothing fancy going on here. This papyrus is a dark brown, so you can see the ink, right? Nice epsilon or theta there, upsilon mu there, epsilon nu. You can sort of make out the ink with good light, with a microscope, you can do pretty well. The first major technological breakthrough with the Herculaneum papyri took place around the year 2000, when at a conference, a group of scholars from Brigham Young University out in Utah in the United States presented the results of infrared photography used on other carbonized papyri found in Petra, Georgia, most famous as perhaps the site of some Indiana Jones scenes. Infrared photography does wonders for carbonized papyri. This same bit under infrared light looks like this. Much more legible. Way easier to read. You can now get a lot more text out of them a lot easier. The work goes faster. You don't have to be in Naples to do this, right? You can now do most of the work of editing a Herculaneum papyrus from your desk in, Belfast or Central Ohio or wherever you happen to be. And there's real value in this. This column here, this complete one, is our only source for a fragment of Alcaeus. I think it's 358 in Voigt and Liebermann's Boudet. Here, see this letter that looks kind of like an F? That is not a normal Greek letter. That's actually a digamma. This is one of the few digammas preserved on a papyrus. So tone, won, thama, thumon. He often does something to his own soul. So it's a nice Homeric, reflexive, possessive adjective. All these nice technical terms that you're probably learning in class. Right. This is our source for this fragment of Alcaeus. It exists nowhere else in our documentation from the ancient world. Not all of them are this small. This is part of Philodemus's On Anger. You can see that the text is a lot more extensive. The contrast isn't great, but you can play around with that in Photoshop all you like. This is one of 16 pieces. So this is 1/16 of the length of the On Anger. A nice scale so you can actually get a sense of how big these things are. So this would have been slightly more than 20 centimeters tall and in the neighborhood of 10 or 12 meters long. And it's nicely written in columns. You would literally scroll from left to right as you read. And then you'd have to rewind the scroll like old VHS cassettes. Most of the library is Greek philosophy. Most of the vast majority of that is written by this guy named Philodemus of Gadara. This is one of the few papyri that is in Latin, and it's the only Latin papyrus that's actually pretty legible. If you spend much time with ancient manuscripts, the uneven line ends here tell you immediately that this is poetry. This is an epic poem. It's in dactylic hexameter. Scholars call it the Carmen de Bello Actiaco, or the poem on the Battle of Actium. It was probably in 2 books, so maybe not more probably than 2,000 or so lines of dactylic hexameter, maybe a bit shorter. It depends on how late it went. But I think Cleopatra dies in the extant part, so it can't have been that long. Um, Beautifully legible Latin, right? Molem right there. Inter down here. Um, nice rustic Roman capitals. Cervicibus, 2 or 4 his necks, their necks. Um, so you can look that up in any good collection of the fragments of Latin poetry and read that at your leisure. This is one of the more interesting ones. It's called P. Herc Paris II because when Napoleon conquered Naples, he gave it back to his buddies in Paris, and it stays there to this day. It's a copy of Philodemus's On Slander, but down here you can just sort of barely read an an omicron, upsilon, epsilon, rho. That's a damaged gamma. Have an iota here. That's the top of a lambda, another iota. So that's where Gili. So where Gilio, Virgil in Greek. So this is one of the 2 or 3 books that Philodemus dedicated to apparently his students, Virgil, Quintilius, Plotius Tuca, and Varius Rufus. Once you get into the history of Roman literature, you find out that these people are pretty important, right? They're all in the circle of Maecenas, who is Augustus's basically minister of culture. Virgil, of course, everybody knows the Aeneid. Horace writes an ode of consolation to Virgil about the death of Quintilius. They're all, it turns out, school friends. They all studied Epicureanism together with Philodemus. Um, there's some other stuff. This is another text by Demetrius Laco. You can tell from this that it's a geometry textbook, and it is indeed Demetrius the Spartans on geometry. So you get some nice, right, 2 letters with a line over it, identifying lines in the geometric figures, just like everybody's school geometry textbooks. That goes all the way back to the Hellenistic period. It hasn't changed basically at all. So up until now, basically, all of our work has been done on the rolls that were physically unrolled back in the 18th and early 19th centuries on Piaggio's machine. But there are maybe 250 or so rolls that were never unrolled. And this is kind of the, you know, the goal, right? We want to be able to read these. They ought to be in better condition, right? When the scrolls were unrolled, they were damaged in various ways, right? Simply unrolling them caused cracks. The papyrus itself is really brittle and flakes off. The ink has faded over the last couple hundred years. The ones that are still rolled up have not suffered nearly so much. They won't suffer in unrolling if we can read them without opening them. So that's the big goal. The first thing that almost anybody says when they hear that there are still Herculaneum rolls that are rolled up is, have you tried X-raying them? Yes, we have. This is what the X-ray or a CT scan, basically the same thing for our purposes, of a Herculaneum roll looks like. You can see it is not a neat spiral. It is not a neat oval. That's why they never tried to unroll this, right? You can't you can't manage this kind of surface geography on Piaggio's machine. This is a close-up. So each one of these is, in theory, a layer of papyrus, but oops, that one splits in two. Why is this one so bright? And why is it splitting there? Nobody knows why it's so bright. This is what the technical people call very politely unpredictable structure, which means in plain English that it's already broken inside the roll. One thing you might have noticed you haven't seen any trace of is ink, and that's another problem. If you can actually find your layer and unroll it, it looks like this, which is a beautiful image of the fiber structure of the papyrus, but there's no ink. You can't read anything. So there are two big problems here. One is they have to basically manually unroll the papyrus digitally. That is to say, they have to go through these images and say, nope, this is still the same layer. This is still the same layer, still the same layer. All this is the same layer, and manually mark that in a program. And they have to do that at certain intervals so that the program can say, oh yeah, it's marked here, and a centimeter down, it's marked here. And there's papyrus that's more or less contiguous through that. So we're going to call that all the same layer. And when it works well, you get unrolled bits that look like this, but even this has these little flaws in it where the papyrus is broken or the computer guessed wrong about what the layer was. And those are going to have to be sorted out one day. The other problem is the ink. So the papyrus is a plant. It got turned into charcoal when Vesuvius erupted. The ink that was used to write on it is also carbon-based. It's just soot and a binding agent and water. So it too is basically charcoal. So you're looking for black on black. And in the Demetrius Laco that I showed you, if the papyrus is brown under natural light, the ink is still black. You can sort of read them. It shows up well in infrared. Here, we don't have the opportunity to use natural light because we're trying to avoid opening them. So we've got to find something that differentiates the carbon papyrus background from the carbon ink on top of it. What they found was this. This was the prize-winning submission that proved that we could find ink in these images. I will give you a second to look at that and see if you can find what Casey Handmer found that won him the prize. So it is this stuff, right? The bit that looks like really dry mud. This has the technical term crackle because it looks like a crackled surface. This crackle is the ink on the surface of the papyrus, or rather, it's the remains of the way that the ink sort of dried up and broke when it was being superheated, and it's a visible surface feature that's different from the normal papyrus surface. So this is probably a pie, right? Nice top bar, two horizontals. You're probably looking at a nice capital pie. What happens here is that, so this was important because it gave everybody something to work with. So this is where the artificial intelligence comes in. They trained various groups trained an artificial intelligence on the crackled bit of papyrus to look for other crackled bits of papyrus. And this is important because not all of this is visible to the naked eye. It's there on the papyrus. It's in the CT scan data somehow, but it is not visible to the naked eye. The AI can find it in the data without it being visible to humans. And this is what they first came up with. This is what one Luke Ferrator, All Sorts of Glory, back last November or October, I think. This was the first letters, right? This is the first word read in a still rolled up Herculaneum papyrus. It's right here, pi, omicron, rho. That's a phi, believe it or not. Nice loop there in the stem. That's an upsilon. We know that this is a rho, got the nice tail going down. That's an alpha, and there's a sigma. So purphoros, the adjective purple. Probably a few other letters around here, right? This could be eta sigma, tes purphoros of the purple something, or maybe apo porphoros from a purple something. Clearly a lot of work to do. So this is submitted in September and announced in October. And this wins fame and glory for him and quite a bit of money. This is the same thing tidied up a bit. So now it's clearly O Porphyros. Got some other letters nearby. This is the version that they're able to write in a month. This is what they were able to produce. So this is the version that gets released in the press conference. This is the original submission. This is what won the grand prize in December. So this is 16 partial columns. It's been given artificial color. It looks a lot better. It is, in fact, a lot better. You can read a bunch of letters much more clearly here, right? Para, lambda, omicron, probably a pi, bottom half of a theta, there's an eta, right? Not the easiest thing anybody has ever read, but pretty good actually for an ancient manuscript. And right, compared to this, remarkable. And compared to this, right, suddenly we can read complete sentences in less than a year. So that grand prize was won by Yusuf Nader, Luke Ferrator, and Julian Schillinger, or Julian Schillinger. They're all in the sort of computer science realm. They could not read what they unrolled. They submitted it sort of hoping that it would make Greek to the people judging the panel, and it did. You can read the whole announcement on the Vesuvius Challenge website. It has the more legible passages given in normal Greek with an English translation and some explanation. The text appears to be by Philodemus of Gadara, certainly matches his style. He's who we would expect. He's the author of most of the Greek prose in the collection, so he was the odds-on favorite to begin with. There are a lot of, there's the color terms like purple, there are some sensation terms, vision and scent. So it might be a treatise on senses and sense perception. It might be a treatise on decision making. There's some reason to think that. We don't know yet. We hope to figure that out. So this is Vesuvius from one of the vineyards in Pompeii. If you visited Pompeii, you know the vineyards near the Colosseum. This is from one of those, looking at Vesuvius. The next step, the Vesuvius Challenge, is trying to read all 4 of the scrolls that were scanned over the past couple of years. Some of them in Grenoble, France, some of them at Oxford at the Diamond Light Source, and one of them out in Los Angeles at the University of California at Los Angeles School of Dentistry. For some reason, they have a really world-class CT scanner at the School of Dentistry. The goal is to read 90% of all 4 scrolls this year, right? So by midnight California time, December 31st. Again, we're not expecting the computer people to know much, if any, Greek. So there's a team of specialists, one of whom is me, who January 1st will wake up to a large email of potentially legible documents, and we will get to decide if any of them are actually legible. But that's the next step, right? Actually trying to read whole documents that still are rolled up. So that's the end of the main presentation. I see there's probably already one question. So.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'll just stop.